Hello, and welcome to the 7th episode of Virtual Weaponry. I'm XNGA Alpha, and I will be your host. In this episode, we'll be looking at the M1911. The M1911 is an American handgun, originally manufactured by Colt, that served as the standard sidearm of the United States Armed Forces from 1911 to 1985, and so has seen action in a large number of wars, ranging from World War I all the way to the war in Afghanistan. It was originally designed and entered service in 1911, hence its designation, the Model 1911. It fires the .45 ACP round, a round typically found in revolvers and earlier semi-automatic pistols, as well as some submachine guns. The M1911's earliest origins date back to the 1890s, when the search for a self-loading, or semi-automatic, pistol began, in order to phase out the revolvers in service at the time. Following the origin of the .45 ACP in 1904, a series of trials were held in 1906 for a number of pistols from 6 manufacturers, with Colt's M1911 being one of them. 3 designs were eliminated early on, leaving the designs of Colt, Savage, and DWM. The pistols still had some issues, however only Colt and Savage resubmitted their designs. After a series of field tests between 1907 and 1911 to decide between the designs, it was Colt who came out on top, with a test at the end of 1910 securing his victory. Its designer, John Browning, fired 6,000 rounds from a single M1911 over the course of 2 days. When the gun grew to be too hot, it was simply dipped into water to cool it. It passed with no malfunctions, as opposed to the Savage design, which had 37. The M1911 was eventually replaced in service by the Beretta M9 in the early 1990s, much to the dismay of many troops, who criticised the lessened stopping power found in the M9's 9mm cartridge, compared to the M1911's .45 ACP. Still, the M1911 lives on in some units, with some even using modern variants, such as the MEU SOC. With an incredible legacy to its name, the M1911 has appeared in the majority of Battlefield and Call of Duty games. Bad Company 2 was one of the first times that I encountered the M1911, with it appearing as one of the 3 World War II weapons in multiplayer, appearing alongside the M1 Garand and the Thompson submachine gun. The handgun also appeared in the Vietnam expansion as the standard sidearm for the US Army. In all honesty, I mostly used the M9 or MP443 as my sidearm in Bad Company 2, due to my original favouritism of high capacity, fast firing pistols over the slower, high power counterparts. The 1911 was originally too sluggish for my liking, and so I tended to avoid it. It wasn't until Vietnam that I started to use it, due to it being one of 2 choices, the other being the Tokarev TT-33. I decided to stay true to the usage of certain weapons, such as only using American weapons on the American side, and only using Soviet weapons on the Vietnamese side. As a result, I began to use the M1911 more in the base game, and slowly began to enjoy using it as my primary sidearm. The weapon's high power meant that finishing off wounded enemies wasn't too much hassle, with a single well-placed shot doing enough to finish them off. The M1911 was featured as a veteran weapon in Battlefield 3, meaning that if you had played a Battlefield game before, then you could have access to the M1911. I suppose I took this as an obligation to use it, as it's pretty much the only sidearm that I've used. As with the other semi-automatic pistols, the M9 and MP443, there were 3 versions of the handgun to choose from. The standard version that comes, well, standard, the tactical version which came with an underbarrel tack light, and the suppressed version which comes armed with a suppressor. I generally avoided the plain version, as I felt that I may as well be using one of the attachments. I ended up choosing the suppressed version, as I felt like it would be more useful than the tack light. My tactic was generally to use the suppressed version alongside an unsuppressed primary. When a situation arose that I had snuck up behind an enemy, but there was too much risk involved in knifing them, then I would switch to the M1911 in order to take them out silently from a short distance. With the endgame expansion, the S-TAC version of the M1911, originally a DICE exclusive, was made available to the rest of the players once a set of assignments had been completed. I completed the assignments as quickly as I could, and soon got my hands on the S-TAC. The S-TAC is basically the M1911, but with both the tack light and suppressor attached, meaning that I no longer had to decide between the 2. It's safe to say that Battlefield 3 was where I finally decided on the M1911 being my favourite handgun to use, and it truly deserved to be the game's veteran weapon. COD 4 had the same situation as Bad Company 2 when it came to me using the M1911. I tended to use either the M9 or the USP, and very rarely used the 1911. This was mostly down to me not being so gun savvy at the time, and so I wanted to use secondaries that were a lot more modern. Now that I know of the M1911's heritage, and after my time using it extensively in Battlefield 3, I've chosen to swap my secondaries in Card 4 to the 1911, in order to make up for the time that I missed using it. It's safe to say that I have enjoyed using it, and I'm a little disappointed in all the time that I missed using it during Card 4's heyday. Nevertheless, hopefully the 1911 will return in a future card, where I'll be able to experience it to the fullest. While the M1911 didn't appear in multiplayer, it did in fact appear as a usable weapon in Modern Warfare 2. In the museum level unlocked after finishing the campaign, the M1911 is found alongside all of the other pistols in the first room. It's more or less the same as this card 4 incarnation, and is a real shame that it wasn't in multiplayer. Now, as for World at War and Black Ops, I'll be honest and say that I didn't use the M1911 a lot in multiplayer. Besides, I feel that the M1911 has had more of an iconic appearance in another of Treyarch's game modes. The M1911 is the very first weapon encountered in Zombies, acting as the starting weapon for all maps besides Dead Ops Arcade. The first time that I played Nakda and Toten, armed with only the M1911 and a couple of grenades, I was honestly quite terrified, only reaching round 4 on my first ever go at Zombies. Which isn't that bad, right? Right? To be fair, the 1911 is actually a fairly weak weapon, which is understandable considering it's the gun that you start with. Well, it wasn't weak for too long. With Der Riese came the introduction of the Pack Punch machine, a machine that provided super upgrades to inserted weapons, and the M1911 received possibly the wildest upgrade of them all. It became the C3000B180-CH35. I'll let you interpret that yourself. And while it obtained a smaller magazine in the process, it also received grenade rounds that became a lot more devastating than the regular M1911, obviously. When Kino der Toten came out, the M1911 became the first weapon in Zombies to receive even more of an upgrade. Rather than being a single explosive handgun, the M1911 instead became Mustang and Sally, an explosive set of dual-wielded 1911s. In addition, the pair basically came with its own sleight of hand, reloading at swift speeds even without the Perca-Cola. It's also interesting to note that should you go down on solo with Quick Revive, you receive Mustang and Sally to use, regardless of whether or not you actually have them. Unfortunately though, you don't get to keep them when you get up. The pair are quite fun to use, and it's very enjoyable to see the carnage created from 2 grenade-firing handguns. Due to having the 1911 as a starting weapon, it can be quite difficult to upgrade it. In order to accomplish this, you need to have one hell of a secondary that can both defend you well and rack up a lot of points. Even then it can be difficult. Should your secondary run out of ammo, you will more often than not be left in a sticky situation with a less than useful pea shooter to hold off the undead. The introduction of the Mule Kick Perca-Cola can make it a little easier to upgrade the 1911, allowing you a third weapon to get points with. It is pretty rewarding once you do get Mustang and Sally though. However, I'd still recommend investing in protection in the form of PhD Flopper, provided that it's on the map of course. While Mustang and Sally aren't my personal favourite choice when it comes to upgrading, they have certainly helped the 1911 to see usage past the first 4 rounds, and cement it as an iconic Zombies weapon. Typically in multiplayer, I like to use the 1911 in its intended role as a secondary weapon. Like any other pistol that I use, I'll usually be in the middle of a firefight when my primary runs dry. At this point I'll remember the infamous words of Gaz: switching to your pistol is always faster than reloading. Alternatively, I'll usually equip the 1911 with a suppressor in order to carry out my battlefield tactic. Whilst most of the time I will simply knife my target from behind, I'll also use the suppressed 1911 if there are a number of foes to take down, or if I get caught in a small battle and would rather reinforcements didn't know I was present. Finally, I also like to use the 1911 to build up a few points in the early rounds of Zombies. The M1911 is a truly classic handgun, setting the standard for semi-automatic pistols everywhere. Its simple design and powerful 45 ACP round have left one hell of a legacy, with the pistol seeing action 100 years after its original implementation into armed forces. The M1911 certainly isn't a weapon to mess with. While it isn't exactly the easiest pistol to use, it sure is a weapon deserving of veterans. So, whether you're taking down an army of the living or an army of the undead, this century-old pistol might kick like a mule, but it sure packs a punch. Thanks for watching. Be sure to join me next time when I cover the first machine pistol of the series, the MP9. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will speak to you later.